My name is Z Yasso, and I have a bit of a different project for the Generative AI Hackathon this year. Instead of having something that's more easy to demonstrate, I decided to improve an existing project of mine that generates long-form fiction using GPT and other language models. I call this system Automuse, a portmanteau of automatic and muse. Automuse generates its scenarios using a calculus called Plotto, which allows you to take random numbers and generate plausible plot scenarios out of them. It then uses this combined with other information from both GPT language models and other additional factors that have been known to increase output quality, and generate a plot summary, a list of characters, a list of events, a list of chapters, and finally the entire novel prose. Automuse also then will take that generated prose and use Pandoc to stitch it together into an ebook. I had created this previously when the GPT 3.5 API was announced and I wanted a bad idea to kill some time. Recently, OpenAI announced the existence of the GPT-4 Turbo 128,000 token model. 128,000 tokens is enough to store an entire novel's worth of context as defined by the National November Writing Month rules. They want a 50,000 word novel, which is about 75,000 tokens when it comes to GPT models. A 128,000 token model allows for the possibility of generating an entire novel with a single context window, which is a significant improvement over the previous system having to manage multiple context windows, haphazardly stitching them together, priority queues to make sure that the system prompt was still involved, and a whole bunch of nonsense that I was just glad to be rid of. The use of Plotto continues to be a core part of how Automuse works. Plotto generates the ideas, the dramatis personae, and the GPT models put them to action. I also took the time to throw in the use of DALL-E 3 to generate cover images, and was going to also add some illustrations for various parts of the novel, but did not have time to complete that. I have created 2 works of fiction with Automuse version 2, but sadly only one of them was considered to be a novel. The first novel that I tried to publish with this came out to 47,000 words, which was sadly about 3,000 words short of the goal. The second publication, named Virtual Virtue, came out at 55,000 words. Both stories were generated with different scenarios and plots, but they were generated with the same GPT-4 Turbo 128,000 token model. I was hoping that the use of a single context window for the entire novel using their Threads API would work out, but if you look at the contents of the first generated result, you can see it deteriorating over time. I'm not entirely sure why this is happening, but it looks like the entire context window is too large to be useful. This is a problem that will need to be addressed in future versions of Automuse, likely after future development in coherent context windows has occurred. To work around this, I changed Automuse to create a new context window for every book chapter, which allowed it to remain coherent for the majority of a chapter at the result of information loss between chapters. I'm willing to make this trade-off for now, though. When I generate a novel with Automuse, I follow the standard process that you use to write a novel in the first place. They call this the inside-out process, or starting with a premise, then working backwards to what happens. Or effectively, starting with a very small outline and then gradually adding more and more detail as you flesh things out. To do this, first Automuse selects a scenario and plot using Plotto. This generates a whole bunch of random things and it'll tell you if you have a mystery novel, a adventure, or a romance. The algorithm will then select a catch, or an additional plot element from a fixed list of things that I thought would be interesting. Automuse then uses the ChatGPT API to expand this into a plot summary and a list of chapters with a high-level overview of what happens in them. Then it uses the output of Plotto's character generation to create character summaries with the ChatGPT API. It also uses those chapter summaries to create a list of all of the coherent events or scenes with the ChatGPT API. Once it has all of this raw input, it starts going over every scene in every chapter, and it iterates through context windows so that it is able to generate all of the prose. Once it's done, it generates a cover image and stitches everything together with Pandoc. The main difference between Automuse version 1 from earlier this year and version 2 is the use of GPT-4 Turbo. This allows you to put an insane amount of context into the model instead of several pages at most. This allows for much more coherent output. The biggest advantage to using a GPT-4 model here is the vastly increased quality in the written content. Here's an example of a plot summary written by GPT-4.
In an era where the sanctity of the internet has evolved into the paramount religion, Virtual Virtue tells the tale of Haley's unconventional quest to confirm the authenticity of heir partner Braylon's love. The story unfolds, revealing the struggle between genuine human connection and the facades maintained in a world dominated by online personas.
This is a significant improvement in quantity and quality over the previous version of Automuse, which would have generated something like this.
After a disastrous turn of events, software engineer, Mia, finds herself stranded on a deserted island with no communication to the outside world. Mia uses her knowledge of peer-to-peer networks to create a makeshift communication system with other stranded individuals around the world, all connected by the same network.
It's worth noting that I did not change the prompts between both versions of Automuse, so the difference in output is almost entirely due to the model change. Automuse version 1 also did not spend very much time in the character descriptions, which led to characters being very flat, boring, and overall uninteresting. Automuse version 2 uses the following method to generate some interesting character descriptions. The Plotto summary generates a list of characters and their roles in the story. But when generating character summaries, I add in some randomly generated gender and sex characteristics to each character with Faker. The character summaries that are generated in this way allow for things that are much more diverse and interesting. I also did a fair amount of prompt scrying to find the best combination of words to generate prose. When I did some experimentation and I combined the outputs with my previous prompts, I had led to the point where each user message in a thread was the individual scene summary, and the model would just imagine the rest of it. This was way better than the previous one where it had to give the explicit instruction, hey, write the book now. It led to wasting a lot of tokens. Here's an example of what some prose generated by Automuse version 2 sounds like.
With a breath that seemed to carry the weight of worlds, Haley pressed send. The message vanished into the Nexus, a digital missive crossing the stream of zeros and ones to arrive at Braylon's doorstep.
Previously, when I was making cover images for Automuse books, I had to do it manually with stable diffusion, and overall, the point of this is to automate things, so why am I doing it manually? Automuse version 2 uses the DALL-E 3 API to generate cover images, which allows for images like this to be generated. Automuse version 2 is a generational improvement over Automuse version 1, but it does have flaws. Here are a couple of those flaws. Automuse uses Plotto as a source of plot generation. Plotto was created in 1928, and it has a lot of 1928-isms that I haven't thoroughly excised from the corpus. Careful filtering of these Plotto summaries is required to avoid repeating harmful cultural and social biases. Automuse currently uses GPT-4 for its inference, which is a proprietary model that I cannot download the weights for. I also cannot fine-tune it very easily without costs that I just do not want to incur. Using one context window, as I said, was a mistake, but we hope that this will be fixed in future iterations. The reason why I'm submitting this to the societal impacts section of the hackathon is that automating away art allows for a huge disruption to artists that genuinely do rely on the income that they make by producing art. However, when I was designing this, I had the idea of the predatory ghostwriting industry in mind. In the predatory ghostwriting industry, you are paid probably half a US penny per word. You have to churn out entire novels in a month, and it overall is very damaging to your psyche, not very cost-effective for the people involved, and At some level, displacing these peoples so that they can have better employment elsewhere in a hopefully less predatory situation would likely be better for everyone involved. At its current rate, Automuse version 2 spends about $25 to write 50,000 words using GPT-4. Compared to half a penny per word, this makes Automuse a significant cost reduction in the process of creating pulp novels. This is a setback from Automuse version 1's cost of 20 cents to write 50,000 words, but the higher quality and internal coherence of Automuse version 2 is much more than making up for the increase in cost. However, the quality of Automuse-generated novels is still unable to compare to the output of a highly skilled human author. Due to the fundamental nature of these networks, they cannot truly create new outputs, but they can create unexpected combinations of things that already exist. This is a fundamental limitation of the technology that powers Automuse that will need to be addressed in future versions of this project, if not in future generations of large language model technology itself. At this time, I don't believe that Automuse can displace human authors from their jobs. A version of Automuse could be used to help authors generate and test ideas, similar to how a language server in a coder's editor will help them generate and test code, but honestly, it would require a lot of custom effort that is probably not worth doing with the technology so nascent as it is. As future models get released and improved on, I'd like to improve Automuse to be better and better. I would also like to improve the relevance of stories that Automuse tells, as well as making them more reflective of the inherent diversity in humanity. I would also like to base this on an open source large language model. I wasn't able to due to time, but making an open source language model would allow for me to release custom fine-tuning as well as fine-tuned model weights for different tasks in this system. The generating characters versus summarizing things versus generating the actual prose are vastly different tasks and probably can be done better by fine-tuned individual models. I'd like to make a book club of sorts where people read Automuse generated novels once per week, but with the quality of the fiction as it is right now, I don't know if this is good use of my time. Overall, I think that Automuse version 2 is a very interesting product and allows for a lot of improvement as large language model technology improves. Thank you for reviewing my submission to the hackathon. Be well.